hello, good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Your money front and center today. The economy growing and the president's new nemesis staying put.
But we're keeping the rates high, and it's hurting people from buying houses, so we don't want that.
So when might the Federal Reserve lower interest rates? What Jay Powell had to say today. Plus, he once called the New York Police Department wicked, corrupt, and racist. Does the Democratic Socialist still believe that? What Zohran Mamdani said today as the New York Police Department deals with tragedy. Also tonight, she is out, at least for now, at least for the moment. Kamala Harris says she is not running for governor of her home state of California. So does that leave a door open possibly for 2028? And I guess you could say it's kind of gone with the wind. The president saying no more windmills. The man who is trying to reverse that joins us live. But first tonight here from The Hill, money, 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 and a whole lot of it being discussed today. Do you remember the scene from last week? President Trump showing up at the Federal Reserve face to face with one of his new arch rivals, the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, calling on Powell to lower interest rates. Well, didn't matter. Powell today saying rates, which impact everything from your home, auto, and credit card loans. He says rates are staying flat. And not tipping his hand about a possible rate cut in September, despite suggestions from the president just minutes prior.
I hear they're going to do it in September, not today. For what reason? Nobody knows.
We have made no decisions about September. We don't do that in advance.
All right, so when could rates go lower? It's a big question, right? Well, markets right now who are sort of pricing all this in, they believe right now the next meeting, the Fed meeting, when they meet in the middle of September, basically a coin toss, about a 45% chance that it'll happen. But skip ahead close to Halloween, and it's basically a 2/3 chance that the market is pricing in that is when the next rate cut will take place, still several months down the road. But this is what the White House is pointing to tonight. Not necessarily what the Fed did, but this. Second quarter GDP, which, by the way, started at the same time as the president's quote-unquote Liberation Day tariffs. GDP increased by 3%. Consumer spending up by 1.4%. President Trump saying today that in his view, the economy is ripping.
We have a great thing going. I think we're going to have the richest economy you've ever seen. We have money coming in that we've never even thought about at numbers that nobody's ever seen before.
But here's how the Wall Street Journal editorial board put it. This is their headline today. The weirdest GDP report ever. The economy grew 3%, but mainly because imports collapsed. Business investment fell too. Both sides of the story there. We're going to get into it all here. Chris Steyerwalt, Mick Mulvaney joining me in a moment. But first over to our Kelly Meyer live at the White House. Hello, Kelly.
Hey there, Blake, and I'm so excited we get to catch up about this because you're my go-to guy on this, and if folks at home don't know that yet, you're breaking it all down for them, which is so helpful. And we really haven't heard, I want to say, from President Trump on this announcement from the Fed chair since it happened. He just had an event in the East Room, but he really didn't comment on it too much or put a true social post out just yet, at least. He's over in the West Wing now. But really he even said ahead of this he wasn't expecting him to lower the rates today, even if he had this entire pressure campaign on Powell to do so. Here's what President Trump had to say just before that announcement came in.
He's done a bad job. Now he's got a meeting today, but I call him too late. You know, he's always too late.
And that meeting you mentioned between the two, Powell and Trump, Powell saying today that was a nice visit. You see it there on your screen. And he didn't seem to be impacted at all by President Trump's pressure campaign. He says having an independent central bank has served the public well, and as long as it does, it should be respected as such. He also said we don't know yet the impact of the president's tariffs. He said higher tariffs have begun to show up in some prices, but overall the effects remain to be seen. Here's more from Powell.
A reasonable base case is that these are one-time price effects. Of course, in the end, there will not be. This will not turn out to be inflation because we'll make sure that it's not. We will, through our tools, make sure that this does not move from being a one-time price increase to serious inflation. We want to do that efficiently, though.
Blake, one big question tonight. Will this renew President Trump's push to fire Powell? I asked Kevin Hassett, his top economic advisor, if the president has indicated when he might name a successor, something we've been talking about. He told me that President Trump asked his Treasury Secretary to lead the process, go through all the best candidates, and present the president with some options. A little awkward because both Scott Bessent, his Treasury Secretary, and Kevin Hassett are potential names on that list. Blake.
All right, indeed they are. Kelly Meyer. Live for us tonight on the North Lawn. Kelly, thank you. With me now, Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff, and Chris Stirewalt, host of the Hill Sunday Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Berman.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah, a lot of news today.
I like the seersucker, by the way. It's very
Can
you get away with that on television?
I was hoping you would like it. That's why I wore it.
I just thought you had narrow
rocking it in the middle of the summer. I thought that Jay Powell soundbite there that Kelly just showed us was fascinating, Mick, because it sounded to me like the chairman of the Federal Reserve was basically saying, I'm going to save you from the tariffs.
See, they save you from inflation. Keep in mind, I'm looking at that, and I know, going back to my college days in economics, that was hinting at raising rates.
You think so?
Not cutting them. If he's worried about inflation, okay, that means he would raise rates. Keep in mind, these numbers are very confusing. The 3% GDP is a great number. And if the economy really is running hot, then the Fed is more likely to raise rates, not cut them.
And Trump's calling for them to be cut.
But some of the underlying data is really weak, which would encourage you to lower rates. So it's all over the place. It doesn't surprise me that Powell is not allowing himself to be pinned down because he doesn't know what he's going to do at the next meeting in September.
Yeah, this GDP report, it says that there's a lot of trouble underneath. You have a good top-line number that, as the Journal points out, gets juiced by the tariffs because the number of imports dropped dramatically. And the other thing to remember about the tariffs, if Donald Trump had said, I'm putting a 15% tariff on all goods from the European Union, people would have said, that's crazy. Right. Panic, panic, panic. But if he says, I'm going to put 40% on, and then says, but it's just a scant 15%, right? Then people say, oh, boy, what a relief. We will live out, and what you hear the Chairman Powell saying is we're going to live out in the next 2 quarters of the year. What are the actual consequences of this stuff? Because we've been playing footsie and goofing around. We're going to find out what's for real.
So where do you think Trump is right now? Because if he had his way, Powell would have been gone on January 20th at 12:01.
Yeah, but he can't fire him.
Right, I know. That's why I wonder.
They tried to cook up this cockamamie thing where they go down and they're gonna oust him because of budget overruns for the Fed and all that stuff. Republicans in the Senate this is one of these things like when Trump tried to overturn the 2020 election. Republicans in Congress want to say like, yeah, well, we're interested in hearing more about this, and if we talk slower, maybe the problem will go away.
Yeah, wrong. I mean, the Senate, I don't think any Republicans in the Senate, there would be one or two, want to see Powell gone. It just creates too much chaos in the system. I don't think Trump is going to fire him. I think they're trying, I think they're mostly trying to, well, they have an argument that they could over the cost overruns. They have an argument that they could over his testimony to Congress. But again, I think you end up in a lawsuit, and he's only around till May anyway. I think they're trying to get him to quit.
Former budget yeah, and he won't do it probably. Former budget director and obviously chief of staff. I'm wondering from your view, the economy is where right now, real quick.
Choppy. It's the wait and see economy. We don't know what's happening. Inflation is not here. A lot of us, myself included, thought it would be. It's not yet. There's some hints in these numbers that it might still be a threat. The top line number is not as good as it makes itself out to be because when imports go down, GDP goes up, and that's what you're seeing here.
What about resilient and dynamic?
I mean, look, consumer confidence is super high, right? Americans are feeling good about the future of the economy. The anxiety, the deep anxiety
but the spending is down. Their confidence is high, but the spending.
The spending isn't what is retail? 80%, 70% of the economy is consumer spending. So it's not where people would like it to be. But I think people are feeling more optimistic. But again, this is the problem of we're going to have a tariff apocalypse. Right. Actually, there was no tariff apocalypse. Yeah. And then you get like a tariff mini apocalypse and people will be bummed out.
And against the backdrop of all the tariffs, you also have the one big beautiful bill. We don't know how that impacts the economy. It should be positive. I think it should be in a big way positive. But again, if it's too positive, that's going to encourage the Fed to raise rates because they're going to worry about inflationary pressures from the bill.
All right. See both of you later in the show. Chris, Mick.
Was that easy? Did we cover that? Was that simple?
We did the economy in 5 minutes, yes.
Whiteboard.
Check the boxes, right? All right, so GDP up, rates flat, but our congressional stock purchases headed down. A Senate committee today advancing a bill that would end congressional stock trading and apply to future presidents, vice presidents. President Trump today, when asked about all this initially, called for a high-profile investigation.
I like it conceptually. I don't know about it, but I like it conceptually. And, Nancy Pelosi became rich by having inside information. She made a fortune with her husband, and I think that's disgraceful. She ought to be investigated.
All right, first off, congressional stock trading is a bipartisan problem. No one tracks this more than Unusual Whales. And here's the report showing lawmakers who beat the S&P 500, according to Unusual Whales, last year. Lots of red and blue and a whole lot of folks making some green. Some with portfolios topping 70%. Among the top portfolios, Nancy Pelosi's, whose husband runs a venture capital firm. Their portfolio is a thing of internet lore. The Nancy Pelosi stock tracker, for example, has 1.2 million followers on X. And as that tracker shows, she is easily beating the market by a lot. Joining me now, the Democratic Congressman Seth Magaziner, who has sponsored bipartisan legislation calling on congressional trading. Congressman, thanks for being with us. I know you're rushed to the computer to be here. I appreciate the time and the hustle. President Trump said today, investigate Nancy Pelosi. Whether it's a Republican or a Democrat or Pelosi, do you think he's on to something here with an investigation?
Well, the most important thing is that congressional stock trading needs to be banned, period, full stop. As you pointed out, there are plenty of Democrats and plenty of Republicans who have been playing the stock market at the same time that we have been voting on and considering legislation that can move the market. And that is just fundamentally wrong. So I have made a commitment along with Chip Roy and some of the other Republican members who I've been working on this issue with. None of us are going to call out specifically other individual members because we understand that if we're going to get this done and ban stock trading.
That's fair. You don't want to call out.
This has to be a bipartisan, because this has to be a bipartisan effort. This is an issue with bipartisan support and bipartisan opposition. I'm just focused on getting a ban passed, which is long overdue.
I understand not wanting to call out your own colleagues. I think anyone in business would understand that. But I went back today and looked up how many members of Congress have been charged with insider trading since the turn of the century, and it's been one. And I'm not saying everyone's insider trading, but that suggests that everyone here is above board, and I think many people would question that.
Yeah, that's obviously ridiculous. And there's two problems with this, right? One is that as members of Congress, we have access to inside information all the time. We know what might be in a bill or might not be in a bill before the average member of the public does. And that is fundamentally unfair. Second, when we decide whether to vote for or against a piece of legislation, we should just be thinking about what we think is best for the country, not what is best for our investment portfolios. So that's why we need a ban. As far as that statistic you mentioned about only one person ever being charged, that just shows that the current status quo, where we have to report trades but we're still allowed to make them, is not good enough. Transparency is a first step, but it's only a first step. We just need to ban the practice altogether.
All right. Again, I appreciate the hustle, sir. Seth Magaziner, one of the members of Congress introducing bipartisan legislation on this. The president talking about it earlier today. Congressman, thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right. Still to come tonight. Here on the Hill, he once called the NYPD racist. Today, a different story.
I've been very clear about my view of public safety and the critical role that police have in creating that.
Zohran Mamdani speaking on the future of the NYPD if he becomes the mayor of America's biggest city. We'll show you what else he said. Plus, Gone with the Wind. The Trump administration saying no more money for wind turbines. The man who was suing to try to stop that with us live. And later, former Vice President Kamala Harris, her future potentially revealed. The race she will not run, but the door that just might open up. I'm Blake Berman. Thanks for being with us tonight. Back here, other side of the break in 4 minutes.
of public safety and the critical role that police have in creating that. My statements in 2020 were ones made amidst a frustration that many New Yorkers held at the murder of George Floyd.
That, of course, the New York City Democratic mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani earlier today holding a press conference to pay tribute to the off-duty NYPD officer who died Monday during a shooting in Midtown Manhattan. Mamdani also asked about his prior statements calling to defund the New York City Police Department. Just a few of his tweets over the recent years, he repeatedly called to defund, disband the NYPD. Quote, the abuses described here perpetrated by the NYPD Vice Squad at taxpayer expenses are acts of evil. Another, quote, queer liberation means defund the police. Another, quote, we don't need an investigation to know that the NYPD is racist. Joining me now, Chris Cillizza, NewsNation contributor, Chris Hahn, up there in New York as well, NewsNation political contributor. Hello to you both. Chris and Chris, thank you. Hahn, I'm going to start with you. It's your home state. It's one thing to say, I believe taxes should be at 25%. No, I believe taxes should be at 20%, and then you switch your position. It's another thing to say, just a few years ago, the body's racist, and then to come out today and to try to position yourself as pro-police. What'd you make of what Mamdani said and how he's going to handle this?
Well, it's more important how his opponents are going to handle it. I think the defund the police movement was perhaps the biggest act of political stupidity I have seen in my entire long career. It set back a movement which had an opportunity to actually reform policing in America, and it threw it out the window, wasted an opportunity. He has made his statement. The question is, will his political opponents effectively hang that defund the police around him, which is not a popular sentiment among any significant demographic, whether they are Democrat, Republican, or independent, rich, poor, black, white, you name it. It is one of the dumbest things ever said. Now, he tried to walk it back. He said he was off base with it. Let's see what he does. And I got to tell you, New York City Police Department has had its problems, but I will like to say Jessica Tisch is doing a fantastic job bringing that department back into its perfection that it wants, not perfection, but bringing it back to a level of excellence that the city deserves.
So, Liza, how do you think, to Chris's point, that Andrew Cuomo and certainly the sitting mayor there, Eric Adams, handle this?
Yeah, I mean, look, Andrew Cuomo has to think. I think Eric Adams is more of a nuisance candidate, candidly, than anything else. I think, I don't know that Andrew Cuomo can win with Eric Adams in. But so I'm focused more on Andrew Cuomo. I think Andrew Cuomo tries to say, see, this is the difference between governing a city or a state and sort of taking a bunch of positions, in a vacuum. That I've done this. Mamdani hasn't. I actually think what Mamdani did today is smart, which is say those comments were of a time. I don't agree with them anymore. I did not campaign on them because he knows Cuomo is going to go after him on this. But go ahead.
Is he still trying to have it both ways, though? Because the Special Response Group, which was the NYPD unit that initially rushed to the scene, he had been outspoken against that recently, and he was asked about it earlier today. I want to play this, and then I'll pick up with you, Cillizza.
There is a need to ensure that every act we take is one that is actually delivering public safety. And what we see right now, especially with regards to how we respond to protests, is not in line with that.
So it seems like there's a lot of comma butts with him on this issue, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he wants to try to get away from some of those positions, which, by the way, my friend Chris Hahn nails on defund the police is literally one of the dumbest possible slogans. It continues to haunt the Democratic Party. He's trying to gently get away from those things in a general election while not looking like a guy who just said a bunch of stuff to win a Democratic primary. I mean, this is not a new dance. The Republicans do this from conservative positions, although not Trump, but Democrats do it from liberal positions. So I don't think it's new. I do think it is a reflection of trying to put down the Cuomo, any momentum Cuomo could get very quickly.
Han, I'll give you the last word here, 30 seconds.
Yeah, no, I agree with Chris. I think what he did today was smart. He's sitting there with the victim, the police officer victim's brother, talking about what he's going to do about policing in New York. And I don't really see real campaigns coming from Cuomo, Sliwa, or Adams right now. I see one person campaigning, and that's Mamdani. And right now he's running circles around everyone else, including people who are very experienced. I think Andrew Cuomo, one of the most experienced people in politics in this state. Mamdani, who's very inexperienced, has a lot of political skill, and I don't see anybody coming at him.
All right, I got to leave it there. Han, I was going to wish you good luck on the trade deadline tomorrow for your Yanks and Mets, but that would be bad news for my O's and Marlins.
I need it, man. It's been bad. It's been a bad couple weeks.
Chris and Chris, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Blake.
Of course. All right, still much more ahead tonight here on the... Oh, by the way, before I move on, exclusive polling, DDHQ tomorrow on that race. We'll unveil it here and get into it on the show. But before that, another longtime aide to former President Biden up on Capitol Hill today testifying on the president's health. Who knew what when? What did they say? And on the other side of the break, is it goodbye to wind turbines?
We will not allow a windmill to be built in the United States. They're killing us. They're killing the beauty of our scenery, our valleys, our beautiful plains.
The man who is suing to try to stop that with us live.
We will not allow a windmill to be built in the United States. They're killing us. They're killing the beauty of our scenery, our valleys, our beautiful plains. And I'm not talking about airplanes. I'm talking about beautiful plains, beautiful areas in the United States. And you look up and you see windmills all over the place. It's a horrible thing.
President Trump, Scotland just a few days ago, from sea to shining sea. It turns out that one of his top political adversaries might not be a Democrat, even a person, rather those things right there. Wind turbines. Why do they matter? Well, for starters, they account for 10% of electricity, give or take, in this country. The president on Truth Social today saying it's the quote-unquote biggest hoax of them all, he claims, saying he won't be approving of any more money for them. But it's nothing new. The president has been railing against wind turbines for years.
Darling, I want to watch television. I'm sorry. The wind isn't blowing. If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations. Your house just went down 75% in value. You want to see a bird cemetery? Go under a windmill sometime. You know what it is? I want to be a whale psychiatrist. It drives the whales frickin' crazy.
Comes as well as his administration now considering further hurdles to halt wind development farms. The Interior Department will also review if bird deaths are associated with it. The EPA, by the way, also trying to roll back Obama-era regulations that paved the way for EV mandates. And to give you an idea of where these turbines rank on the president's priority list, on his first day of office, he signed an executive order blocking new leases for projects. Literally one of his very first moves. Oregon, one of the states who joined that lawsuit, their Attorney General Dan Rayfield in town for a big hearing tomorrow. We'll get to that in a second. Dan, with us live here on the Hill. Nice to see you in person.
Yeah, thanks for
being with us. You were one of the 18 or so states, I believe, who were on that lawsuit. What were you trying to do there? Because the president talks about this nonstop. He was even posting about it today.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about wind turbines more than anybody I know, and he's against them. I think this is one of those odd situations where Republicans are normally for lessening the burden of actually moving projects forward. And this is one strange area, a way that would diversify our electric grid in the United States, where he's trying to put the brakes on. And what we do know is in these situations is you need to have planning as you're thinking about the mixture of your electricity in the world. And we're trying to sit there and be in a space, especially in a place like Oregon, right, where we're trying to lower the cost of energy for consumers.
You are in town for a hearing on tariffs, which is obviously the big news, one of the big stories, obviously, in this town. You're trying to stop the president from going forward with it. At the end of the day, he is the president of the United States, though. And if this is his policy, whether you disagree with it or not, shouldn't he just be able to implement his policy? And whenever Democrats have their shot at it, they do their thing.
The way you say that sounds incredibly logical, but we have this important thing called the Constitution. And the Constitution says that only Congress can do tariffs. Now, the Congress has given the president some powers, but there's sideboards to that powers. And so the president right now is abusing an emergency power to try and implement tariffs in a way that no other president has done. I do agree with you, right? Tariffs can be helpful. You should give some deference to the president, but the president's just like you and me. You got to follow the laws. You got to follow the Constitution. All of us learned that in grade school.
He put on the tariffs the first go around. Joe Biden kept every single one of them on. So I wonder if this is just sort of the new normal. I know you look at this from the legal side of things, but is this actually just the new normal going forward?
But here's the thing that I want to see. The Trump did do tariffs this first time around, but he did them the appropriate way. So Congress delegated authority, and the way they delegated it is they forced the president to consider, and they put safeguards to keep our economy safe, to keep our economy protected, to keep small business protected, and more importantly, to keep you and I protected from the price increases that we're going to pay.
So we were chatting during the break briefly, and you said to me, Oregon, you're a part of like 36 lawsuits or something like that involving Trump. So I guess the question is, at a certain point, when is enough enough? Like, it just feels like lawsuits are being filed left and right because it's Donald Trump.
Absolutely not. What you have to do when we make an assessment of whether we're filing a lawsuit, the first thing I say, are Oregonians or Americans being harmed? The second thing I have to ask is the president violating the Constitution? Is the president overstepping his bounds in law? We all have to follow laws. We're a nation of laws. And when you don't do that, then you have to be held accountable. And I believe that this is the situation we're in. We should not have had to have filed 35 lawsuits as the state of Oregon. We've been compelled to do that because we have a president that continues to overstep the Constitution.
Hasn't the Supreme Court gone from like 90% of the time or something like that? Like, I wonder at what point the AGs sit back and say, okay, enough is enough.
Well, let's focus at the real thing here. We have 16 preliminary injunctions right now. That means judges, Republican-appointed judges, Democratic judges, have ruled that we have a likelihood of prevailing on the merits. In fact, in that tariffs case, 3-panel judge, a judge appointed by Trump himself, or a Reagan judge and a Clinton judge, unanimously agreed that the Trump's tariffs were unconstitutional.
All right, we'll leave it there. Dan Rayfield is the Attorney General, a state I've never been to, but I'm dying to get.
We got to get you there.
Oregon. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Catch you soon. Still to come tonight here on the Hill, a big announcement from the former vice president. There had been a lot of speculation that she was going to run for governor of California. In fact, Democrats who I would talk to in that state thought that is exactly what was going to happen. Turns out she has different plans, but here's the key phrase, quote unquote, for now. What does that mean? And coming up later, what is trending on the Hill?
Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
I have to tell the truth.
America's favorite sparring duo with TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
That's an opinion, not a fact.
Tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on NewsNation. News for all Americans.
On NewsNation, some big news politically coast to coast just a little while ago. The former Vice President Kamala Harris announcing that she will not be running for governor of California, her home state. The former vice president, presidential candidate as well, saying in a statement, quote, "I love this state, its people, and its promise. It's my home. But after deep reflection, I've decided I will not run." Of course, that raises another question, maybe opens another door. Does she have her eyes once again on a bigger prize, possibly another run at the White House down the line, some unfinished business? All of it, by the way, happening as another one of former President Biden's top aides. You see him walking in there, Steve Ricchetti, testified before the House Oversight Committee earlier today on the former president's mental state. Ricchetti, in his opening statement, obtained exclusively by The Hill, said, quote, "Let me be clear, at all times during his presidency, I believed that President Biden was fully capable of exercising his presidential duties and responsibilities, and that he did so." Ricchetti, the 7th former top White House official, senior official of the administration, to testify, several of whom have already used the Fifth Amendment. But the committee is by no means done wrapping it up. Several more high-profile names scheduled to testify as well in the upcoming days and weeks. You see some of them there, including the former press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, former chief of staff, Jeff Zients. Iowa Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor with us. So too is Linda Tran, former senior advisor to Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And Niall Stanage, White House columnist for The Hill. Hello to you all. Thanks for being in. I'm going to start with you because this was some big news in a state that you know fairly well, I believe. Kamala Harris, the prevailing thought was that she was going to run for governor. At least that were some of the whispers in California. And
as of late, I mean, a year ago, I mean, again, nobody would have had that on their bingo card, right? So
as of late, in the last few months.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that the Democratic Party was waiting with bated breath, to find out whether or not she was going to throw her hat in the ring, because obviously she would have had a significant name ID advantage.
Yep.
She had held all of these statewide roles as well as sat as U.S. Senator for the state of California before she became vice president. And if you looked at some of the recent polling, she also had a significant advantage over folks.
Yeah.
Now, that said, there were some Democrats that were concerned, right, about if she ran, would that actually drag in some baggage and get some of the GOP folks pretty excited?
Is the baggage just the Biden stuff?
Exactly. So that would open up an opportunity for them to talk about what she did when she was vice president.
Right. Nick?
My experience in this town is that the only reason that ambitious politicians don't run for office is that they don't think they can win. So my guess is she looked her hand over and said, if I run and I lose, I'm finished. Maybe I'll wait around.
They said to Dick Nixon. That's what they said to Dick
exactly
Nixon.
Right, but then he ran for governor of California to prove
and lost
and won so that he could prove he could win again. Didn't he?
No, he lost. That's when he said you won't have Dick Nixon to kick around anymore. It was
listen on Stirewalt. I give this to Stirewalt.
It wasn't. Many people said it was not fun.
But do you many people said? But do you think that she actually pulled out, or not pulled out because she never was in? Because she couldn't win, or because there's a bigger picture and a bigger prize? I believe she's only 60 years old, right? So there's an eternity in politics these days.
Who is telling Kamala Harris she can win the presidency? Anybody?
No one at this table.
Okay.
So is that it? You think we've seen the last of her?
I definitely don't think she is riding off into the sunset by any means. And if you're looking for evidence that someone that people counted out could get back in it, I mean, just look at Joe Biden, right? When he chose not to run, when he was the sitting vice president, people said that was going to be the end of him.
I think that the risk-reward calculus for running for governor of California wasn't that great for her. If she won, people would say, well, she should have won. She was the sitting vice president and the Democratic nominee for president. If she'd lost, that would indeed be the end of her. May as well keep your powder dry. It doesn't foreclose the possibility of a presidential run. I'm not persuaded she will run for president again because I think she would lose. And that would be a pretty humiliating experience, but we'll see.
There isn't a question that she's the answer to right now. Things change, and sometimes the people will want that. But I will just say that on the whole, Biden is old stuff. I think that the Republican inquest into Joe Biden's decline in office is about as sincere as the Democratic inquest into Jeffrey Epstein.
I was about to make that parallel.
And in both cases, we see what it is, right? There's no cover-up. Donald Trump was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Joe Biden looked like a mudslide, right? It wasn't like, I can't believe that any of this is true. So this all reeks of exploiting this and trying to crank something up, and I think it's
is your side getting anything out of this? I mean, so let's show the faces again, because these are some of the most prominent, powerful figures in Biden world, or at least during the White House, that not a lot of people know. That can't pick them out of if they were to walk in a Starbucks. Not these folks. You know, Karine Jean-Pierre, Jeff Zients, not known around the country, but even the other full screen, the other 7 who have testified, like 99.999% of America, if they saw them in a Starbucks, wouldn't know them.
Looking good in a tux, though.
Right? But is your side of the aisle getting something out of this by dragging them up there and doing this?
I don't think so. I think it's a fishing expedition, and they're hoping that somebody comes in and says, you know what, I got to be honest with you, I thought the guy was gonzo. I saw people using the auto pen. I don't think that's going to happen.
I think it definitely hurts Biden's chances for 28.
we can say that fairly?
I think it takes him out of the running for 28.
I just don't see anything monumental coming out of this. It hasn't made much news. Klain made a little bit of news, but that's about it. I think the more interesting thing is going to be to see what happens if some of the people who received pardons are charged anew by this Department of Justice. They invoke the pardon as a defense, and then you get into the legalities of the pardons. I think that would be the really interesting thing. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I think it's going to be a lot more interesting.
And we all look forward to President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's inquest into Donald Trump's state of mind in his second term.
Yeah.
And we can just live in a perpetual, a doom loop of going back to every administration forever and ever and trying to do this stuff.
To pick up on that point, what if they went back to the first administration and said, Mick Mulvaney, you were the chief of staff, come on in?
Mick would come on in.
I have been
answer the question, Mulvaney. Answer the question.
I have been subpoenaed before congressional hearings before.
But it gets to the point of down that road and when that stops and how that ends.
Look, let's step back and try and make some sense of this. If they wanted to use this, maybe even on a bipartisan basis, to deal with the issue of politicians who stay in office longer than they probably should, that's a helpful thing. We talk about mental acuity. There's actually a Democrat who introduced a bill this week about doing mental acuity tests for elected officials. It's unconstitutional. It's never going to pass, but it does spark the debate. Maybe that's what this can be used for in a positive sense.
The smaller the Biden presidency gets in the rearview mirror, the less any of this matters. It's different if you're inquiring into somebody who's in office or has left office that month. Now, at this point, this is an appeal mainly to people who are already pretty fervent supporters of President Trump anyway and want to keep negative news about Biden and Democrats in the headlines.
How much, though, will this damage the candidates going forward? Because back to Vice President Harris and the chance of her running in California, Javier Becerra, who is in the race there. Anthony Villaraigosa, who is in the race there, put out this statement about Kamala Harris a few months ago. He said, voters deserve to know the truth. What did Kamala Harris and Javier Becerra know? When did they know it? And most importantly, why didn't either of them speak out? And I think about your guy, Pete Buttigieg, and I'm not asking you to speak for Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, he got asked about it.
And it's just going to follow all these people. What did you know? When did you know it? And what do you believe?
Yeah, but I don't think it's actually going to have any impact. And that's for two reasons. One is because voters don't actually care. I think what voters care about, we've seen play out in polls after poll after poll over the last couple of months here. They care about the price of their groceries. They care about the price of the gasoline they're putting in their car and the cost of their daily lives. That's one point. Okay. Second point is, I think you handle it exactly the way my former boss did, where you answer it by saying, I never saw anything of the sort.
Okay. We'll leave it there.
Biden 28. Go deep.
Now, is that Joe or is that Hunter?
Oh, we will leave it there. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Still to come tonight here on the Hill. Speaking of 2028, the Texas Senator Ted Cruz, he's traveling somewhere this weekend. I'm going to tell you why that is news and why it is just the beginning. My take, other side of the break. And coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Reports, Jesse Weber filling in for Elizabeth, talking to a Harvard scientist about an interstellar comet, which he believes could be an alien craft.
Hey, what?
That's 7 o'clock Eastern, 8 minutes away or so. What's trending? My take, other side of the break. Stay with us. Catch up on your day. Here is what's trending on thehill.com. First story here. The story that doesn't go away, obviously, right? Jeffrey Epstein files. Democrats in Washington are actually citing a 1928 law, pretty obscure law, a rule, that they are now citing to try to get the Epstein files released. And around and around and around all of this goes. Another story that's trending on the Hill right now, Thomas Kincaid's family denounces DHS use of painting weighs legal options. He's the famous late artist. And there was a painting that DHS used, a painting involving children. Clearly the family not happy about that. They have asked the Department of Homeland Security to take that down. And then there's this. President Trump asked about this actually on Air Force One on his way back. The Secret Service agent tried to smuggle their wife onto Trump's Scotland trip. When the president was asked about this, he started to go down the line of giving a little bit of details and then basically stopped, saying he didn't want to weigh into it. Obviously, as the president, you're thankful and grateful for the Secret Service, but that is a headline that is trending right now. For those stories and a whole lot more, all you have to do, download the Hill app. You see the QR code on your screen, or of course, you can head on over to thehill.com. All right, so those are the stories that are trending right now, and I want to show you, from my take tonight, a social media post that got my attention earlier today, popped around midday or so. Here it was, media advisory from at Team Cruz, Ted Cruz. Senator Ted Cruz to attend Brenna Byrne Brenna Bird, barn bash. Now, this coming weekend, the senator from the state of Texas will make a speech in Dallas County. That's not in Texas, however, rather in Iowa. And that's the part that caught my attention, because for high-profile politicians to be delivering speeches in Iowa or, say, New Hampshire or down in South Carolina, it usually points to aspirations for 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Well, now Cruz, he's not the first. For example, the Arizona Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego headed to New Hampshire next month as well. Earlier this month, Gavin Newsom, 2-day speaking tour down in South Carolina. Pete Buttigieg, who has been criticizing the Democratic Party left and right for past mistakes that he thinks the party has made, he's been to Iowa as well. But those are all Democrats. Cruz, obviously, a high-profile Republican. Now, Republicans have to walk a fine line here, really, in the era of Trump. Come across as too aggressive too early, that might catch the wrong kind of attention from the current leader of the party. Now, I know this weekend only marks August 2025 on our calendar, the end of summer, and thoughts for many of you like me of a new school year on the horizon. But if you squint hard enough, you'll start to get a glimpse of the calendar actually flashing January 2028, when the Iowa caucuses will roll around once again. That is my take tonight. I thank you for watching us here on the Hill. Lots of news in this town today. You had the back and forth once again on display between President Trump and Jay Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, saying interest rates stay steady for now. We'll be here tomorrow in Washington to cover it all. I'm Blake Berman. I thank you for watching us tonight.